Hi, welcome to the National Queen's Choice Online News. I'm Robin Stienberg and welcome to my show again. Today we have a guest from Jawaharlal Nehru University, none other than Professor Girijesh Pant and Dean for School of International Studies from New Delhi. He's going to share with us about food security in South Asia, including India and other parts of South Asia, and updates on how it's been coping. Professor Pant, welcome to my show again.
Thank you.
And South Asia is developing as one of the biggest economies in the world today. And it's interesting that many have asked about what's happening with food security in India and other parts of South Asia. Could you give us some in-depth trends and highlights?
You said very correctly that South Asia is almost a continent of its own kind, with huge diversities. And of late, at least one part of the South Asia, that's India, has been doing fairly well in terms of economic growth rate. However, there are certain paradoxes and contradictions of the economic growth as such, not only in India but in South Asia as a region whole. Coming to India first, India, though in the gross national product the share of agriculture has declined, it's around 12 or 15% or so. But the dependence of the population on the agriculture sector is very huge, you see. And therefore, agriculture sector faces a very serious situation that you have a very small share, relatively small share in the total national cake, but you have to support a population which is around 40 to 45% of the total people in India. Now, this intensity has led to various kind of situations. This is one component of it. The second component of it is that, after the Green Revolution, which is located not across the country, in certain part of India, that's northern part of India called Punjab, the prosperity came for some period of time. India could rescue itself from PL 480 borrowing. But today's situation is that we find around 30 to 45% of the people, of the different estimates, the estimates vary, are in a situation that they, despite the fact that India has wheat in the stores, are not in position to purchase it. You see, this is a paradox of what we call the neoliberal economic policy, which has excluded, the exclusion dimension of it is that a number of the people are not in a position to take advantage of, even if India has a food. A second issue which has been bothering to an average Indian citizen is that we know for sure that the government has not been able to provide a kind of infrastructure support in terms of storage capacities, in terms of distribution. As a result of that, we find that wheat is there in the stocks, but it is it's not being coming to the market. You see. So in a sense, I would like to say that on the count of food security, it's not as much a scarcity an issue as is question of governance, as a question of distribution. And of course, the question of transparency and accountability is very much part of it. The other South Asian neighbor countries, as far as the Pakistan, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh is concerned, they are, their agriculture is still very much hugely dependent upon what is happening in the monsoon part of it. It's not to argue that India is free from the dependence of the monsoon, but India still has an irrigation mechanism and facilities that you can still buffer. The kind of buffer is always there, but the development of agriculture in terms of mechanization, etc., is not very good. Has not been very adequate in other part of the South Asia. Therefore, wherever there is a problem with the environmental issues as they influence about your monsoons, timing, etc., the crop becomes an issue. Then also the entire infrastructure to bring from field to market is another weak point of the other countries. And therefore you will find that both in case of Pakistan and Bangladesh, in fact last year the season was quite fairly bad, you see. And they were facing this situation, and we in fact talking in terms of a wheat trade between India and Pakistan as a kind of trade which will eventually give us a confidence between improving the political relationship between the two countries. So to sum up, the macro picture in South Asia is not very promising at the moment, you see. I wouldn't like to make an alarming in forecast kind of thing, but I would certainly like to underline that unless until the government in South Asia are not going to revisit the entire agriculture policy. The first component is the agrarian reform. Second component is that, which again has to be recognized, is the fact that the Indian or South Asian agriculture is still controlled by or owned by the small farmer or the medium farmer. It's not a large, huge corporate kind of, it's not corporatization of the, it's not agribusiness per se kind of thing. So the state will have to take the responsibility in terms of creating a climate, support systems by which the small and medium farmer has some safety net whenever there is a problem of the monsoon or whenever the problem, the credit is concerned, when the market is concerned. Uh, you know, one of the biggest huge lacuna of South Asian agriculture in general and India in particular has been that there is a disconnect between the rural economy and the growing urban economy, you see. And the terms of trade has going against the agriculture sector than to the urban economy. So as a result of that, you will find that the even if the crops is good, you see, you get price out from the market, and then in the absence of a kind of a value chain system there. So it is the intermediaries which are picking up the crop and bringing to market. They are the most beneficiary in terms of manipulating the entire market mechanism. So even if suppose we agree to pursue an economic development model around the market, we have to build a very efficient system of the market mechanism, which is hugely missing in this country. And therefore the entire burden falls on the small farmers, and as a result of that you find that a huge amount of distress is in the region, in India particularly. I should also mention in the food security debate that you can't think of a food secure country if your farmers are not safe, you see. And despite the fact that the 65 years of Indian independence and to some extent a successful story, today the paradox is that many of our farmers in Andhra Pradesh area are committing suicide, you see, and they are committing suicide because the input cost in agriculture has gone up, and in the name of the modernization, especially in the name of bringing the cash crop, which helps you to go to export market. As a result of that, you find that when the input cost is high and the crop has not been good, and they have been not able to get return out of it, and so therefore you will find that the number of families, the farmers, under distress, are committing suicide, and that is one of the serious issue, not only political issue but also very much serious and humanitarian issue also, and that is what Indian state has not been able to address to the satisfaction of the people there. So.
Now, how does India trying to combat against poverty for farmers? Are farmers facing the issue of poverty?
You see, that as I told you that the entire, if I have to look at the entire correlation of the forces which are emerging in India at the moment, unlike the 50s and 60s, which at that point of time Indian state was highly sensitized toward the rural India, and therefore the agriculture sector was quite important at that point of time. But as over a period of time, when today at this juncture, if the moment they look at the national wealth generation process, they discover that it is the export-based service sector which is predominating, you see. So the coalition which rules the Indian state or makes the Indian state finds a huge stake in promoting the service-based, where the ITB has played a very important role. So if the moment that has become a niche area, by default, the agriculture has been suffering as a result of that, you see. So if I have to, I don't want to make a very pessimistic prognosis, but I do sense that if the governments are not going to be alert about the kind of concerns of the farmers, especially I'm talking the small farmers, they will be eventually opting out of the democratic fabric of India, you see. And that will be very dangerous because, as you know, the India is the only country of its own kind which has been able to provide a model of democracy with multiculturalism and multi-ethnic society, which inspires to many developing countries across that, even if it is not a perfect model, but that a doable model, people with similar situation, similar historical colonial history, have been able to emancipate from themselves and have been able to make a choice in terms of forming government, which is a rare thing to happen. So therefore, Indian democracy, the stakes in success of Indian democracy is not for the Indians alone, but all the people who have a democratic aspirations that have the stake there. And therefore, I would like to feel concerned about it, that if the Indian state is not going to be sensitive enough and does not recognize the exclusion which is taking place and alienation which is taking place at the small and medium peasantry level, the backlash could be more serious. And I'm only worried about it because recently, the farmers feeling displaced of about and being forced to sell their land, etc., are politically quite charged about it, and therefore the Indian democracy has to address this issue. Even if the growth comes from the service sector, you cannot ignore your food basket, and therefore that is going to be a serious issue for elections in 2014. Whosoever is going to contest here will have no choice but to speak and address the issue of the rural India.
Now, is India going to provide more subsidies for the farmers and also for the new and small farming?
You see that subsidy, and the moment India has gone to a neoliberal economic policy, one of the assumption of this model is that subsidy is an inefficient way of running the system. Therefore, you should cut down the subsidies. You see, in a country where the income distribution pattern is highly skewed, you see, you cannot take the textbook position that subsidies should be cut down. You see. So therefore, at the moment, the debate in India is that, well, subsidy, you can't subsidize to the extent because that leads to fiscal crisis, which the Indian state is facing there. But at the same time, the issue is that how to rationalize and what should be the rational way of looking at the subsidies. So what now the present government in the last 1 year, 6 months or 1 year, what they are trying gradually is they are making a differential kind of subsidies. The target groups should get the benefit out of it, not the affluent or the relatively better of the middle class should not be the beneficiary of this. So the subsidy is an issue which no government in India can afford to say no subsidy. But certainly the question comes that you cannot take a blanket subsidy as we were doing earlier, because the fiscal problem is very serious about before the government. So what I envisage is that gradually the government will be trying to make a differentiation between those who are the target groups they deserve and they have to be looked after, and will be trying to exclude certain middle class people who have been got the benefit of the high growth economy. For instance, recently, in the cooking gas, you see, which is highly subsidized, now government is cutting down the subsidies and also making some kind of quantitative restrictions in subsidies also. So these measures are being taken, and I don't visualize that we can have a subsidy-free economy in the near future, but of course a differential pattern will be there.
Now, what about food security for women and children? Is there any policies which the Indian government is looking into providing and ensuring that women and children are being looked after and insured?
It's that you might have read the reports coming that in terms of HDI, Human Development Index, India is not faring very well, despite it is a big economy and that is a positive part of the Indian economy. That's fine. Which clearly shows that the distribution part of the Indian economy is a serious issue. And the fact that one of the largest malnutrition childs are in India or in South Asia, it doesn't promises a very good future for this. It is, I mean, we talk at one level, we talk of the demographic dividend because we have a younger population, we should get benefit out of it. But if the younger population is not, nutrition level is not sufficient, then it's more a liability than the asset for you. And therefore, India, I mean, coming to think of it, we do not have a very sound food policy, which takes into account the fact that the nutrition of children is very, very important for making of any modern state, whether India, Pakistan, or somehow the attention of the government, of the state, has been not, I mean, at best they have been talking about the agriculture, but I'm making a distinction between from agriculture to food, you see. And if you go to the food where the question of nutrition becomes very, very important, I am afraid we don't have very cohesive kind of a policy regime which takes into account the concern which you are talking of. Say the children's there, malnutrition children are there, the women's are there. These issues are very, very important. I should mention this fact to you that women play a very important role in the agriculture sector in South Asia, including India. And but the conditions are certainly not very much. I mean, agriculture as such is not very in a good shape, and the burden of the incidence falls very heavily on the women folk because they have to look after both the domestic economy as well as the farm economy part of it. And therefore, we do not have a very defined perspective how to address the issues which are exclusively related to the women who are working in the agriculture sector. And that's the issue of concern for the policymaker. I'm afraid at the moment I don't see a kind of very sensitization toward this issue.
What kind of challenges is India facing right now in terms of food security, and what kind of debates do they actually often now addressing between the people and the parliament?
See, one basic issue which India has to first is the question of productivity, which is important. After the Green Revolution, we are on the declining. The kind of upward moving curve is no more upward moving in terms the kind of growth rate which we experienced in the earlier period. Therefore, India has to. A time has come that India has to take very seriously in terms of giving importance to its agriculture sector, both in terms of mechanization part of it, in terms of empowering of the farmers, which is very important, and the institution so far we have at one stage of, you can say, we have certain system in place, but if you have to move beyond that, if you want to make 9%, 10% of growth rate, you cannot sustain that growth rate unless until your economy is also empowered, you see. So therefore I would like to argue that the one serious consideration for India has to give address to the urban economy. This is not to argue that, rural economy, this is not to argue that urban economy is less important. But last 10 or 20 years, one can very clearly see the bias of the Indian growth in favor of the urban economy. Now, as you know, that the moment the urban growth moves up and rural lags behind, the very serious consequences which are not only affecting the rural economy, but also the urban economy as well, because the sustaining capacity, the carrying capacity of the urban economy gets disturbed, because if the huge migration takes place from rural India to the urban India, you see. So what is very important for us that we don't, I mean, migration, if people are moving for certain better cause is something else, but if people are moving in the distress situation, that has to be addressed immediately. So that is the first. I would like to argue that now the next government, whoever is going to form a government, will have to very clearly spell out a policy of India's rural economy, and which means that developing not only the agriculture sector, but also the rural economy which is around the agriculture sector, which also is very important. It means that even the food processing, etc., has to be done at the rural level, you see. and then creating a infrastructure linking to the market as such, you see. For instance, the warehouse capacities are there, you see. All these things are at the moment are located not in the rural part of India, but in the urban part of India. So that's what I would like. Certain economic activities have to be, that's what the point I'm saying, the value chain which you are talking of, that a certain part of the value chain should be relocated in the rural India itself. And that will create job in the rural India, and then people will not be forced to come out to the urban India, in terms of jobs, in terms of looking after. I mean, because not will not be driven by the poverty as such, you see. So that is one of the serious concern. The second issue which we are going to face is about the. So one is the organization part of it. The second issue is about the technology part of it, you see. India, the mismatch between the natural resources, the exploitation of natural resources, the land issue, are some of these very serious issues on which India will have to, along with many countries, think in terms of a very fundamental level, that what should be the land use, because again under the pressure, we are finding that good amount of land in India is being taken away from the agriculture sector. Now, last 20 years, there is not significant increase in the arable land. You see. On the contrary, there is a decline. You see. Now, you cannot sustain agriculture for 1 billion plus people if your arable land is on the decline. You see. So, this is second aspect of it, is that how should India try to improve the productivity and try not to, and the land use should remain in the agriculture sector, which is very, very important consideration. And what kind of R&D activity should be promoted, therefore your entire efficiency level in the agriculture sector can increase, because again Indian agriculture sector is very huge but is not modernized, you see, to the extent it should be there. So therefore the huge amount of inefficiency losses are there, which possibly can be taken care if you can streamline your systems.
Now, speaking about streamlining, what kind of investments can investors can look forward to if they should decide to invest in India in the agricultural industry? And do you foresee that there is a good prospect for investors to invest in India in agriculture?
The answer will be yes and no both, you see. Yes, only when if the state is in a position to put the rural economy institutions, you see, in place. Then the investor will find the rural economy is a very, very attractive proposition, you see. Though of course the consumption level in the rural area is going up, and therefore you do come across a situation where the Indian companies are strategizing on the growth of the rural India. But it's more, I would say, I'm not very happy about it, because I still feel that it's a kind of ad hoc, mechanisms which are working. I would like to argue that given the size and the volume of the Indian rural market, if it can be organized, then you will find that for instance, suppose there is a infrastructure facilities are there, roads are there, power system is in place, you will find a huge possibility of Indian, anyone who's trying to make investment there. There is a school of thought in India which still feels is apprehensive that there is a asymmetry between the small farmer and the big business, you see, and therefore they do feel apprehensive about it, that the survival of the small peasantry should not be at risk with arrival of the big corporations, and therefore this school of thought would like that certain kind of safety mechanism should be there for the small farmers, so that they can negotiate a good deal with the big companies. You see, in the absence of the safety mechanism, that these apprehensions are there. You see, so I would like to submit here that if Indian when we are looking for the investment coming to agriculture sector, it's very essential that the local level, the farmers and especially the small farmers, their interests should be protected by certain kind of institutional mechanism, so that they don't get that after 5 or 10 years period of time they become a landless labor, you see, And that is the fear which creates a kind of hostile attitude towards any big investment coming to agriculture sector. And that is a very good question you asked, and I think Indian state will have to address that what kind of, I mean, it's a question of psyche as well, you see. It's kind of a psyche which you have to address, which you cannot address by only policy announcement. It has to be, what we say that a kind of a communication, a rural communication will have to be addressed through their local, leadership, that what kind of relationship we are visualizing vis-a-vis the coming of the investment in the agriculture sector, and how does the benefits are going to be shared. Because I don't know how much your viewers are aware of the fact that still in India the rural economy would like has we have perception in India in rural economy that outsiders are not very much welcome. In outside in the sense of coming outside other than the village economy. So that village economy psyche gradually needs to be addressed. And as I said earlier, it's not because of any hostility other than the fact that what is going to happen, what are the consequences going to take place once the big money, big business going to come to rural India. And that is the issue, and which the Indian state has to educate the people and educate people with a high degree of transparency. See, that look, this is going to happen, and this is how you get the benefit out of it. And unless until they are not educated, you will find. I mean, there can be few success stories here and there, but what your concern is, what our concern is, basically that how Indian agriculture, as a huge market, attracts the investment. That's the major concern.
Now, speaking about investments and also some of the challenges for the investors and the policymakers that they have to face, what kind of recommendations would you give for investors who wants to invest in agriculture, or what kind of agricultural products or investment opportunities are there available in India? And do you think renewable energy is the way to go for India in the future? And do you foresee that water is going to be a real issue for India?
You see, coming to the last question first, you see, as far as the water, my assessment is that the water is an issue more in terms of mismanagement than the quantum part of it. You see, India is a country of rivers, fairly huge, rainfall is there. What we are miserable are in our is that we have no water management policy, that how to take advantage of your rivers. So we have a situation when the floods are there and water is drained out, you see. There is all said and done is still Indians, because it's of late now the water is becoming important because we are feeling the scarcity as a consequence of our bad management or no management kind of thing. So I would like to argue that if Indian state can do management well, then water, at least in near future, is not an issue. I can't say long term, because Keynes said in long term all of us are dead kind of situation. But of course, if we are not going to do management part of it, then we are facing a situation where the people are contesting for the water. There is a crisis of water is also there. But this is largely a policy, as far as I understand, is a management failure rather than the availability of the water itself. Now coming to your other questions regarding the investment, as I told you that if you are thinking that rural India is a heaven for investment, then I will say be slightly alert about it. There is huge potential about it, there is no doubt about it, but the potential of Indian rural market is very predicated upon what kind of agriculture growth rate is going to take place in the coming years. And it also depends upon what kind of institutional infrastructures the Indian state is going to create there. Second thing which I would like to say that in today's context, when the market economy is facing problem across the globe, anyone who is coming to thinking in terms of making investment to rural India that company will have to be socially packaged in a manner that the social concerns, responsibility will have to be significant face of any company which is going to come to Indian agriculture sector. For instance, I mean, just to give an example, that the first issue, the moment you start going to create some kind of a project there of processing of, suppose your fruits or other agriculture sector, the immediate question comes that how much job is going to be there and who are the local people going to get the job or not, you see. So these are some of the issues which you should not neglect, you see. Now, the question the corporate world may say that people are not skilled, then you have to create a mechanism there that the skills are being, generated in the local population itself. The idea here is that when you are participating in the rural economy, if you have a stake, you are a stakeholder, there are other stakeholders as well there. And therefore, unless until a corporate is not going to think in terms of convergence of the stakes of the different stakeholders, it is not a very viable and sustainable proposition, you see. So therefore, I would like to argue that from the corporate sector also, they should not go with the perspective of just maximizing profit and taking profit out, but also think in terms of plowing back a certain component of the profit back to the system itself, so that the system becomes sustainable. It's not that one time going and taking profit and quitting kind of that perspective is no more today sustainable in the age of information technology, because things get spread very fast. People do come to know about it, what has been the past record of a particular company, etc. So that credential of the corporate becomes very important in terms of defining their social role as well, apart from their bookkeeping in terms of profit.
Now, there's also a question about genetics, food genetics itself. Is India getting themselves involved in the area of food genetics?
This again an issue on which India is debating very seriously, because in the cotton crop we have this experience that there was a couple of years the productivity went up, you see, and after that there's a problem there, you see. And the case which I mentioned to you about the farmer committing suicide is largely in the cotton crop issue which is taking place. Then recently, in the case of certain vegetables like brinjal, this issue came there, and the government is still trying to. There's two schools of thought. One is arguing that the genetically modified crop food is, apart from health reasons, they're also talking in terms of economics is not very sound about it, and therefore, I can't make a very categorical answer at the moment that genetically modified food is acceptable or rejected by the Indian system. There is a possibility, and there is a government at least is very keen to promote it, you see. But there are non-governmental pressures or the movement which are going on, which have raised a concern about the entire genome project, you see. So therefore, it's still. One cannot say that which way the regimes are. I mean, of course, it also depends upon who are the people who are going to form the government. As you know, that makes a difference. But as of now, the very strong movement against as well. While there are people who do see that the kind of returns which it provides in terms of volumes, you see, which is essential for sustaining the food security of the people in India.
Now, let's go forward to food security for the rest of the world, relationship with India and other parts of the world. How does India or South Asia able to support policies and so as, or to assist food security in ASEAN, the Middle East, and also in over in in Africa? Because there's a lot of issues with food security right now globally, due to the population growth of 7 billion now that we have today, and it still states to further grow itself all the way till about maybe 2015 or so. What kind of role South Asia is able to play among its neighbors and its friends globally, and what sort of impact do you see?
You see, if you have to look at the global picture, you know that at the moment, at least in the case of five leading commodities, agriculture sector, that wheat, maize, rice, etc. Uh, um, uh, the production base is highly skewed, in the sense there are 5, 6 countries in one area. They are the leading producer. Rest of them are not there. You see, uh, you know. America is the leading producer of wheat as far as wheat is concerned, maize is concerned, you see. So therefore, what happens that if anything goes wrong in that market, the consequence is being felt by across the globe. You see, this is one aspect which we have been experiencing last 8 or 10 years, this kind of situations. Because more interdependent the markets are becoming, more integrated the market is becoming, they transmit the impact of what is happening in one part of the country to the other part of the globe because of the linkages of the market there. You see. Now, I would like to argue, this is my reading, is that a time has come when you cannot say that global should not compact with each other. This you can't, you can promote that thesis. There is a kind of integration by sheer compulsions of the innovative technology which is taking place, the people are coming together, you see. And there are huge advantages as well of this coming together, while there can be some problem with this. Now, coming to the agriculture sector, nobody can make a very sensible argument by saying that markets should not come closer to each other. But at the same time, it's very, because the market also has a power structure. You cannot ignore the fact. So therefore, the market should also not promote a kind of unequal power structure. Because not only the benefits is going to be distributed unevenly, but also the crisis is also get distributed. Basically, the vulnerable becomes the most serious victim out of it. You see. So therefore, it's very important, because after all, food is not a commodity alone. Food is something on which people survive. You see. So if it's question of survival is to be factored in, therefore it's very, very important that food has to be seen much larger perspective than merely a commodity which is traded in the market. And in that sense, it is very important that even if there is a global food supply chain, first of all, it's very important that it's oligopolistic character, that 4 or 5 players are controlling particular kind of a product or particular kind of crop, needs to be much more diversified. You see, this has to be attempted consciously by the countries, that it's not only 5 countries, but 10, 12, 15 countries it is dispersed. So the advantage of this is that anything which is going wrong in one part of the globe because of certain environmental or monsoon situation is not going to affect equally to every. There's a alternative geographical site from where you can possibly think in terms of. So this is very, very important, that effort should be made by the Asian country, because I'm emphasizing Asia, because we all know that we are talking in terms of Asian century, we are talking in terms of shifting of economic activities from western part of the globe to the eastern part of it. So if the economic activity is coming here, then food system of Asia has to be very robust about it. You see. And if it is robust about it, then a conscious effort will have to be made by the Asian countries, that the kind of lopsided, rice economy is with Asia, but only rice alone will not able to, you have to much larger basket of the food is there. So I would like to submit that there should be, ASEAN countries have been talking about creating some reserve system, etc. These are welcome development, but these are basically a crisis management system, you see. That if there is a crisis, then you can respond to it. But what I am trying to argue is that a conscious effort needs to be made to bring a structural changes. And therefore, that it is very much essential that the food is what is being produced globally. The Asian share in the global production of this has to be enhanced, you see. So therefore, there has to be a policy which can be an Asian policy, where we are not talking in terms of exclusion. What we are talking that how our people who are, because as we know that income effect is going to take people below the poverty level, and if they are going to people come below the poverty level up, they are coming, then the consumption for the food item goes up, and not only food item goes up, the taste changes, and then different kind of food item is also required. So therefore, Asian growth story in the coming years will be very much demanding a certain kind of very sound understanding on agriculture sector and food in particular. And given the fact that we are not as huge a country as America or the Europe, it's very obvious that some kind of a cooperative effort should be made with a constant understanding. I also would like to take opportunity with you here to emphasize the point that food is also something which is a cultural product, you see. And therefore, it is very important that the diversity of the food system is also maintained, you see. While it's important that what happens in the Western food system is has its own plus point, but we cannot ignore, because I'm making this point primarily because food and health has a relationship, you see. If you start and your food health has a relationship in terms of the your location where you are located there. Why is that? The genetically that in some area people are prone to certain kind of diseases, some to other kind of diseases, is largely because when your food habits are not responding to it, then you find that this mismatch takes place. We have not been able to do this connect. That the food and healthcare is or food and health is very much related to each other, and therefore while there's nothing wrong in tasting the food of the other geographical area, but we should also recognize that that food could be very suitable in terms of health of that particular geographical area, but located in different geographical area, different climatic conditions. It's possible that that food has some, if that becomes a primary item of our dietary, then it can cause you certain kind of a health problem which are unprecedented. This issue needs to be educated and highlighted especially why I'm making this point, because when your people are going to come up from then this can be what is happening today is that we solve one problem and create other problems, and that's what I'm trying to make this point, that the relationship between agriculture, food and health is so interrelated that the Orient countries, the Asian countries cannot dismiss it just in the name of modernization, that we start eating certain kind of calories which are possibly not good for our systems. Now, it is in this context I would like to argue that food security is not only an issue of production, it's equally important accessibility, it's equally important the kind of quality you are talking of. You see. So all these issues are going to be very important in making of Asia as the leading continent in the coming times.
Now you talk about quality. Now the poor can't possibly afford quality food. How are they? How would governments and corporations are able to meet that kind of demand? If you speak about quality, because we spoke to one corporation and they said that that they can't produce quality food. They can only produce food that has a taste that will meet the taste buds of the customers instead of quality. So how would you argue that? Because if you were to talk about quality, then we have to forgo certain health elements involved because of demand and supply.
You see, the corporate world has to again think that, and I don't want to make a long statement, but the kind of crisis, the subprime crisis, has very clearly mentioned that ethics, corporate world also has its own ethics. You see, corporate world cannot have a very narrow perspective of looking at the balance sheet alone. You see, your balance sheet has to factor into the human element. I mean, if the capitalism has to be welfare capitalism to survive, then the market mechanism has to take into account the factor that while you take advantage of my taste buds, you see, but you have to also address the issue that what is happening to the nutrition level. You see, therefore, that's very. I mean, that's what you will find that unlike the West, where the income distribution is also not very fair, but not as skewed as in the many Asian countries. The face of the market is not seen very friendly manner primarily because the market does not take into account the kind of a human dimension of it, you see. And today, when we do not have an alternative system, a market economy has no choice but to have a human face of it. So that argument of the corporate world that we are only concerned about the taste bud will not sell, will not gel. If they will have to change their entire strategy. That while they need to make a profit out of it, but they don't need to make an abnormal profit at the cost of the people there. You see. And as you know, that conflict is emerging in many part of the world because of the corporates, if the corporate behaves in a very narrow perspective. So I would like to argue here that the corporate world will have to learn from the experiences as they come into the developing countries, where the people are living the different standards of living. They are not very near to each other. There is a highly differential income patterns there. You cannot talk only in terms of those who have the purchasing power and ignore those who don't have a purchasing power. You have to address both the issues simultaneously, and that has to be the marketing strategy if you want to stay in the market for long period. So while there is a validity in making a short-term perspective of the bud taste argument, but what I would like to argue, if a corporate world want to make a long-term investment, you have to think in terms of your customers, your client, healthcare as well, and that will eventually enhance the market. You see, it's a market creation strategy in a long-term perspective, not in a short-term perspective.
Now, let's come back to crisis management. Do you think India, as well as the rest of the world, including ASEAN, are they ready for a crisis management? Do they have crisis management in place if should food supply run short?
If you compare, say, 10 years back, then our score is better. So we have been able to do it. But if I have to look at the say 10 years future, I think a lot more has to be done there. See, I mean, our progress has been, ASEAN region has been relatively better placed compared to South Asia. There is no doubt about it. But the problem is that if the magnitude of issues are the way as they are going to come in the coming period of time, we need to have a crisis management policy which not only addresses the immediate issues which are there, which are very important, but also looks at the structural issues, that not only how to mitigate the crisis, but how to create such a structural intervention that the crisis doesn't come in that magnitude, that kind of thing. So that on that scale we have yet to put our thinking, because it is only last 4-5 years, especially I'm talking the food area, that we started recognizing that what is happening in the food front is not an ad hoc situation, but many other issues are coming up, like as you know, that issue of biofuel and things like that which are coming there. Now all these issues are, you cannot, if they are on the horizon, they are looking much more visible, so you have to factor all the possible. So what is required is a more innovative methodologies, understanding that what are the possible issues which are going to impinge upon and how to address this issue, rather than waiting for the time issues to come and then look addressing them in an ad hoc manner. So we require a certain kind of very innovative methodology in that sense. But yes, in short-term perspective, we have been, I mean, especially as I mentioned to you, this part of Asia, which is ASEAN part of it, has been much more alert in terms of addressing. But this is more in terms of crisis management when the crisis is almost there. But I'm arguing that we have to look beyond that.
And what sort of recommendations would you implement for crisis management in the food chain for India?
You see, first of all, I would like to argue that in the Indian context, it's very important that the producers, the most weak link, or or no link kind of situation is there when the producers, small producers are concerned. You see, so first thing you have to say that when you are visualizing a kind of this production value chain, that it's very important that your small farmer is in a position that its interests are protected and promoted. That kind of mechanism has to be. That's rather than looking from top to down, I would like to say in the Indian context, you have to focus more on what is happening in down part of then, because the top people can look after their interests. but it is not the people who are at the bottom of the pyramid, you see. So people at the bottom of the pyramid have to be looked after first in terms of not providing subsidies kind of argument I am not making, but in terms of institutional support, you see. There has to be some institutional support, therefore I can look after my food crop in terms of credit are available to me in the market, and in kind of my inputs are available to me in the market, and therefore I should have an information system. That's very important. That what is happening in the market, you see, so that I can negotiate a good deal with the people to whom I am selling a product. In the absence of the information, quite often I lose in the bargaining, you see. So therefore, the empowerment of the lowest end in the segment in that chain has to be the primary importance, and if that happens, the spillover will take place on its own way, and then will look after itself. I would not like the state to intervene at a higher level, you see, but the state will need not intervention, but the state needs to place mechanism at the lower end, because the farmers in India are not so organized in terms of cooperative or in terms of collective actions that they can at the moment look after. But I am sure that once the process begins, because as in terms of food, in terms of milk, we have done very well in terms of cooperative movement. So therefore, I am very sure that once the process is state start facilitator, it will generate its own momentum and will move forward.
Moving forward, is India able to provide a consultancy as well as agricultural support for the Middle East? Because Middle East is facing tremendous problems in trying to get their crops and agricultural industry going. With the example like Israel managed to create one of the biggest farming or agricultural industries today in the modern world, and it's so advanced that people admire and they wish that they could replicate the same model as what Israel has done, and the Middle East is hoping to do the same like countries like Egypt and so on. So can India able to play an important role for the Middle East?
You see, Israelis, as you said very correctly, they have created heaven out of desert, you see. And that's largely because of their water management policy. The drip irrigation system is so scientific, and so, how to get maximum out the minimum use of water, something very fabulous, and nobody can deny that fact, you see. India can play important role, largely because India has been able to develop infrastructure in R&D sector, there you see, and we have been able to improve especially in not in the irrigation part of it, but the seed in variety of hybridizing the seed and creating the seed economy. We have a fair degree of success in India, and that can be one area which we can share. We can play an important role in the country like Egypt, as you mentioned, which was at one point of time food sufficient, is today highly food dependent country like that. There's no doubt about it. We also have some thing to share in terms of our rural banking, which is of late has playing, because rural banking in India is has acquired a social connotation. You see, it's not purely in terms of lending and borrowing kind of. It's more than that. We have devised mechanism by which, along with the borrowing and lending process, also social issues are, because especially the evaluating the credit worthiness of the farmers, etc., certain parameters which we have worked out, and that is very important, you see. So I would like to say that both in terms of seed economy, in terms of fertilizers economy, in terms of some areas of banking economy which is there, Indian experience, I wouldn't say that Indian experience can be replicated, but Indian experience certainly can be educative to the people there, you see. Where I would like to play, where I would like the country like India or Asian countries or West Asian, Middle Eastern countries should come together is largely research and development platform, you see. Because I am very convinced about it that unless until you have control over the knowledge generation process, no matter whether it's the industry, whether agriculture, or whether any other area, you will not able to come out of the best in terms of value chain, you see. And therefore it's very desirable that in the R&D process, these countries should have should have their own control is not the right word to use, but should have their own mechanism as far as R&D is concerned. And that's the knowledge creation. Second thing is that point which I would like to address, mention here is that being an old agricultural civilization, whether Egypt is concerned, whether the Iraq is concerned, Iran is concerned, or India is concerned, you see, we have had local system of resource management. You see. Now these local systems of resource management needs to be innovative with the technology in a manner, because a big country, in my judgment, has to be more decentralized than centralized, you see. And if you decentralize the economy, then you are, in the process will not be dislocating the people from their habitat, you see. And that is very essential, because otherwise all the consequences which we are witnessing today in terms of, environment is a product of, to some extent, the kind of scale economy we are talking of, is highly centralized scale economy. So I would like to argue that the economies which have had civilizational support in terms of their own system, local systems, you see, that I would not like to, that should be glorified. But what I am trying to argue, they have to be scientifically validated, and with the help of technology, they should be further part of the system, rather than rejecting them or putting in as archival material. That is what is very, very important. And if that happens, because again I will tell you that, for instance, in India, there are many desert areas where, where with the help of the local people, we have been able to bring the local river system back, you see. But that's only because you took the advantage of the local knowledge system. See. Now this local knowledge system, which has been dismissed, needs to be brought in, but as I told you, that it has to be scientifically validated with this kind of support system which we have. And that is very, very important, because unless until we don't have an alternative kind of mechanism, we will not be able to have a kind of a creativity which provides you a kind of independence which we generally talk about it. So creativity is one area which essentially emerges out of the knowledge generation process, and which in turn means developing your R&D system. And since it requires investment, it has a long gestation period. It is desirable that the governments or the people of the different countries in this part of the world should come together, because it's very difficult for one government to support that kind of venture which has a promise or returns going to come after 10 years or 5 years kind of thing. Because when the government are short-lived in their political life, they fail to make a long-term investment. So it is where in this sense a cooperative venture could be made. That will give you dividend after some time, but certainly the dividend will be much more sustainable. Not only one part of the globe, but it will promote across the globe as well.
Well, Dr. Pant, thank you for joining us here at the National People's Choice, and your insights on food security in India and also across the globe. And thank you for joining me here at the National People's Choice. I'm Robin Steinberg, and thanks for really joining me in listening to Dr. Girijesh Pant from Nehru University, who has shared his insights with all of you here on our Steinberg Review. Once again, I'm Robin Steinberg. Thank you for joining me. Have a good week ahead.